Juggalos, can you feel me? Worldwide, running with a hatchet straight out the lotus pod. Always got your back till the end, screaming Juggalo. Dark notice, psychopathic, that's a way.
All right, check this out. This is real shit here, man. Real shit, man. All right, fucking major news here in our world, and I hope y'all feel us and understand what this means, what we're saying. I want you to understand the full gravity of what we're saying. All right. In October of last year, the FBI named Juggalos one of the top 10 gangs on the fucking FBI gang top 10 gang assessment list. All right, right along with the Crips, the Bloods, the Aryan Nation, MS-13.
Juggalos, fans of Insane Clown Posse, a violent street gang. In the same category as evil, violent, murderous gangs such as the Bloods, the Crips, MS-13, Latin Kings, Aryan Nation. Ridiculous, fucking ludicrous. And the thing about it is, if you go online on the websites which describe how the FBI has labeled us a gang, even the people that despise Juggalos and hate ICP think that it's ridiculous. Violent street gang. Let's compare Juggalos to, say, NFL football fans. Okay, there are a metric fuck ton of them. They have like interests. They wear the same clothing. Some of them even paint their faces. They go around. A large majority of them are violent. You know, more violent than any Juggalo group will ever be. Are they a gang? No, they are not. My theory as to why Juggalos are a gang is because they have discovered a group of people that are open-minded and think for themselves. They don't want that. People like that are the elite's worst enemy. It is time for us to wake up, fam. We are not free. Most people on this planet are not free, and they are blissfully unaware of it. Let me give you an example. As Jay said in the 2012 ICP seminar, ninjas that are on probation or parole going back to jail simply because they have a Hatchet Man sticker or a Riddle Box sticker on their car. Back to jail. Police are harassing people with ICP t-shirts, with a Hatchet Man chain. Does that sound like freedom to you? Because you like a band. Because you are a fan of Insane Clown Posse, Twisted, Blaze, ABK, Psychopathic Records, even Tech 9 or Necro. You violate your parole and you get sent back to prison. And it is the same thing with people who have freedom fighter stickers on their car. Those people are being harassed. People with Ron Paul stickers, 9/11 truthers. It's even rumored online. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but they're going after Christians now. They see Christians as a group of people that need to be dealt with.
Underground mafia unknown to the civilization, like an paper trail, backdoor communication, inconspicuous activity with approved liberty for maintaining social isolation.
George H.W. Bush would campaign for a new world order like no other president before him. He would openly discuss it during his State of the Union address.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
Again, a unified Europe was a major goal in creating this order.
With few exceptions, the world now stands as one. A year and a half ago, in Germany, I said that our goal was a Europe whole and free. Tonight, Germany is united. Europe has become whole and free. The world can therefore seize this opportunity to fulfill the long-held promise of a new world order. We can find meaning and reward by serving some higher purpose than ourselves.
The New World Order. It is not a delusion. It is not imaginary. It is real. It is time for us to wake up. We are not free. I am making this video mainly for two reasons. One, I have so much love for the fam. So much love. Words can't describe it. And I want us all to be aware of the world in which we are really living in. Second reason, there are millions of us throughout the planet. We can make a difference. If we open our eyes, we will no longer be obedient, soul-dead, conformist members of this so-called American culture, American consumer culture, I call it. There are millions of us, and because of the fact that there are millions of us, that means there will be a lot less people that they will be able to control. Anyone that has opened their eyes and taken a good look around, anyone who attaches weight to the New World Order is purposely made to look crazy. They call you a conspiracy buff or a conspiracy theorist, a term which they purposely use to diminish and marginalize people by relegating them to the rank of a batshit conspiracy buff. Let me make a rational point followed by a rational question. These people attended the same universities. They went the same fraternities. They have like interests. They have billions of dollars. Rational question. Do you think it's irrational or crazy to think that people in power might get together and have a plan? Oh no, you're a batshit conspiracy buff, you tinfoil hat wearing mother... No. These people get together and they plan everything. How they will further control your life. First of all, it is illegal for anyone in government to get together surreptitiously, well, secretly, and plan things due to corruption. And they have been exposed, which will be presented to you later on in this film. It is time for us to wake up. They are dumbing us down through advertising, the media, and television. Nobody talks about anything anymore. Nobody really has deep intellectual conversations of the concepts of life, you know? Everybody is engrossed in a television set. They're on their iPhone. All people talk about is what the latest celebrity is up to. Oh look, Britney Spears shaved her head. Charlie Sheen went batshit. Look at this. The new iPhone's coming out. More apps. This one you could probably shave with and it rubs your balls. It's ridiculous. Nobody really goes out anymore. Children used to go out and play. Neighborhoods used to have cookouts. No, they are hypnotizing us. I call it hypnotized by binary codes.
You have these private groups that are run and created by the elite, by the ultra-rich, wealthy families that have been manipulating global markets from behind the scenes for generations. They create these private groups that then feed information to the government, to senators, to congressmen, their recommendations, their policy papers, what they think should happen. And it's fascinating because if you actually read what it is that they're doing, the recommendations that they make, they're very able to get them put in place. Discussions that are going on in these private groups are really talks that should be going on in Senate committees and in the halls of Congress, but they're happening with these ultra elite groups that are then pushing their propaganda into the political mainstream, and then it's becoming enacted, it's becoming put into law.
Still not convinced the CFR is promoting a new world order? Listen to what Leslie Gelb had to say upon leaving the New York Times to chair the organization as its president in 1993.
I loved it. Doing a column is a great job. I'm going to an equally great but different job, and in a way a job that caps everything I've been doing in my life, in government and academia and in journalism. I think that's what the Council on Foreign Relations will allow me to do. Well, you know, for example, you had me and 3 or 4 other folks on this show a few months ago to talk about the New World Order, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Bob
I talk about it,
right.
exactly. I talk about it all the time.
New World Order wants a global system where one small central authority of individuals can then dictate a policy that's going to be distributed down to the rest of the world, everywhere, in the smallest little town in the middle of nowhere in some remote country.
1775, the American Revolutionary War began as the American colonies sought to detach from England and its oppressive monarchy. Though many reasons are cited for the revolution, one in particular sticks out as the prime cause: that King George III of England outlawed the interest-free, independent currency the colonies were producing and using for themselves, in turn forcing them to borrow money from the Central Bank of England at interest, immediately putting the colonies into debt. And as Benjamin Franklin later wrote, the refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. In 1783, America won its independence from England. However, its battle against the central bank concept and the corrupt, greed-filled men associated with it had just begun. So what is a central bank? A central bank is an institution that produces the currency of an entire nation. Based on historical precedent, 2 specific powers are inherent in central banking practice: the control of interest rates and the control of the money supply, or inflation. The central bank does not simply supply a government's economy with money, it loans it to them at interest. Then, through the use of increasing and decreasing the supply of money, the central bank regulates the value of the currency being issued. It is critical to understand that the entire structure of this system can only produce one thing in the long run: debt. It doesn't take a lot of ingenuity to figure this scam out. For every single dollar produced by the central bank is loaned at interest. That means every single dollar produced is actually the dollar plus a certain percent of debt based on that dollar. And since the central bank has the monopoly over the production of the currency for the entire country, and they loan each dollar out with immediate debt attached to it, where does the money to pay for the debt come from? It can only come from the central bank again, which means the central bank has to perpetually increase its money supply to temporarily cover the outstanding debt created, which in turn, since that new money is loaned out at interest as well, creates even more debt. The end result of this system without fail is slavery, for it is impossible for the government and thus the public to ever come out of the self-generating debt. The founding fathers of this country were well aware of this. By the early 20th century, the U.S. had already implemented and removed a few central banking systems, which were swindled into place by ruthless banking interests. At this time, the dominant families in the banking and business world were the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds. And in the early 1900s, they sought to push, once again, legislation to create another central bank. However, they knew the government and public were very weary of such an institution, so they needed to create an incident to affect public opinion. So, J.P. Morgan, publicly considered a financial luminary at the time, exploited his mass influence by publishing rumors that a prominent bank in New York was insolvent or bankrupt. Morgan knew this would cause mass hysteria, which would affect other banks as well. And it did. The public, in fear of losing their deposits, immediately began mass withdrawals. Consequently, the banks were forced to call in their loans, causing the recipients to sell their property, and thus a spiral of bankruptcies, repossessions, and turmoil emerged. Putting the pieces together a few years later, Frederick Allen of Life magazine wrote, "The Morgan interests took advantage to precipitate the panic, guiding it shrewdly as it progressed." Unaware of the fraud, the Panic of 1907 led to a congressional investigation headed by Senator Nelson Aldrich, who had intimate ties to the banking cartels and later became part of the Rockefeller family through marriage. The commission, led by Aldrich, recommended a central bank should be implemented so a panic like 1907 could never happen again. This was the spark the international bankers needed to initiate their plan. In 1910, a secret meeting was held at a J.P. Morgan estate on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. It was there that the central banking bill called the Federal Reserve Act was written. This legislation was written by bankers, not lawmakers. This meeting was so secretive, so concealed from government and public knowledge that the 10 or so figures who attended disguised their names when en route to the island. After this bill was constructed, it was then handed over to their political frontman, Senator Nelson Aldrich, to push through Congress. And in 1913, with heavy political sponsorship by the bankers, Woodrow Wilson became president, having already agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Act in exchange for campaign support. And 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted in, and Wilson in turn made it law. Years later, Woodrow Wilson wrote, in regret, Congressman Louis McFadden also expressed the truth after the passage of the bill. A world banking system was being set up here, a superstate controlled by international bankers, acting together to enslave the world for their own pleasure. The Fed has usurped the government. Now, the public was told that the Federal Reserve System was an economic stabilizer, and inflation and economic crises were a thing of the past. Well, as history has shown, nothing is further from the truth. The fact is, the international bankers now had a streamlined machine to expand their personal ambitions.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
For example, from 1914 to 1919, the Fed increased the money supply by nearly 100%, resulting in extensive loans to small banks and the public. Then, in 1920, the Fed called in mass percentages of the outstanding money supply, thus resulting in the supporting banks having to call in huge numbers of loans, and, just like 1907, bank runs, bankruptcy, and collapse occurred. Over 5,400 competitive banks outside of the Federal Reserve System collapsed, further consolidating the monopoly of a small group of international bankers. Privy to this crime, Congressman Lindbergh stepped up and said in 1921, "Under the Federal Reserve Act, panics are scientifically created. The present panic is the first scientifically created one, worked out as we figure a mathematical equation." However, the panic of 1920 was just a warm-up. From 1921 to 1929, the Fed again increased the money supply, resulting once again in extensive loans to the public and banks. There was also a fairly new type of loan called a margin loan in the stock market. Very simply, the margin loan allowed an investor to put down only 10% of a stock's price, with the other 90% being loaned through the broker. In other words, a person could own $1,000 worth of stock with only $100 down. This method was very popular in the roaring 1920s, as everyone seemed to be making money in the market. However, there was a catch to this loan. It could be called in at any time and had to be paid within 24 hours. This is termed a margin call, and the typical result of a margin call is the selling of the stock purchased with the loan. So, a few months before October in 1929, J.D. Rockefeller, Bernard Baruch, and other insiders quietly exited the market. And on October 24, 1929, the New York financiers who furnished the margin loans started calling them in masse. This sparked an instantaneous, massive sell-off in the market, for everyone had to cover the margin loans. It then triggered mass bank runs for the same reason, in turn collapsing over 16,000 banks, enabling the conspiring international bankers to not only buy up rival banks at a discount, but to also buy up whole corporations at pennies on the dollar. It was the greatest robbery in American history. But that didn't stop there. Rather than expanding the money supply in order to recover from this economic collapse, the Fed actually contracted it, fueling one of the largest depressions in history. Once again outraged, Congressman Louis McFadden, a longtime opponent of the banking cartels, began bringing impeachment proceedings against the Federal Reserve Board, saying of the crash and depression, it was a carefully contrived occurrence. International bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair so that they might emerge the rulers of us all. Not surprisingly, and after 2 previous assassination attempts, McFadden was poisoned at a banquet before he could push for the impeachment. Now, having reduced the society to squalor, the Federal Reserve bankers decided that the gold standard should be removed. In order to do this, they needed to acquire the remaining gold in the system. So, under the pretense of helping to end the Depression, came the 1933 gold seizure. Under the threat of imprisonment for 10 years, everyone in America was required to turn in all gold bullion to the Treasury, essentially robbing the public of what little wealth they had left. And at the end of 1933, the gold standard was abolished. If you look at a dollar bill from before 1933, it says it is redeemable in gold. You look at a dollar bill today, it says it is legal tender, which means it is backed by absolutely nothing. It is worthless paper. The only thing that gives our money value is how much of it is in circulation. Therefore, the power to regulate the money supply is also the power to regulate its value, which is also the power to bring entire economies and societies to its knees. It's important to clearly understand the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. It is about as Federal Express. It makes its own policies and is under virtually no regulation by the U.S. government. It is a private bank that loans all the currency at interest to the government, completely consistent with the fraudulent central banking model that the country sought to escape from when it declared independence in the American Revolutionary War. Now, going back to 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was not the only unconstitutional bill pushed through Congress. They also pushed the federal income tax. It's worthwhile to point out that the American public's ignorance towards the federal income tax is a testament to how dumbed down and oblivious the American population really is. First of all, the federal income tax is completely unconstitutional, as it is a direct, unapportioned tax. All direct taxes have to be apportioned to be legal based on the Constitution. Secondly, the required number of states in order to ratify the amendment to allow the income tax was never met, and this has even been cited in modern court cases. Third, at the present day, roughly 35% of the average worker's income is taken from them via this tax. That means you work 4 months out of the year to fulfill this tax obligation. And guess where that money goes? It goes to pay the interest on the currency being produced by the fraudulent Federal Reserve Bank, a system that does not have to exist at all. The money you make working 4 months out of the year goes almost literally into the pockets of the international bankers who own the private Federal Reserve Bank. And fourth, even with the fraudulent government claim as to the legality of the income tax, there is literally no statute, no law in existence that requires you to pay this tax, period.
I really expected that, of course, there's a law that you can point to in the law book, the code, that requires you to file a tax return. Of course there is. I was at that point where I couldn't find the statute that clearly made a person liable, at least not me and most people I know, and I had no choice in my mind except to resign.
Based on the research that I did throughout the year 2000 and that I'm still doing, I have not found that law. I've asked Congress, we've asked a lot of people in the IRS commissioners, helpers. They can't answer, because if they answer, the American people are going to know that this whole thing is a fraud.
I haven't filed an federal income tax return since I left.
I have not filed a tax return since 1999.
The income tax is nothing less than the enslavement of the entire country. Now, the control of the economy and the perpetual robbery of wealth is only one side of the Rubik's Cube the bankers hold in their hands. The next tool for profit and control is war. Since the inception of the Federal Reserve in 1913, a number of large and small wars have commenced. The three most pronounced were World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. World War I. In 1914, European wars broke out centered around England and Germany. The American public wanted nothing to do with the war. In turn, President Woodrow Wilson publicly declared neutrality. However, under the surface, the U.S. administration was looking for any excuse it could find to enter it. In a noted observation by Secretary of State William Jennings, the large banking interests were deeply interested in the World War because of the wide opportunities for large profits. It's important to understand that the most lucrative thing that can happen for the international bankers is war, for it forces the country to borrow even more money from the Federal Reserve Bank at interest. Woodrow Wilson's top advisor and mentor was Colonel Edward House, a man with intimate connections with the international bankers who wanted in the war. In a documented conversation between Colonel House, Wilson's advisor, and Sir Edward Grey, the Foreign Secretary of England, regarding how to get America into the war, Grey inquired, "What will Americans do if Germans sink an ocean liner with American passengers on board?" House responded, "I believe that a flame of indignation would sweep the United States, and that by itself would be sufficient to carry us into war." So, on May 7, 1915, on essentially the suggestion of Sir Edward Grey, a ship called the Lusitania was deliberately sent into German-controlled waters, where German military vessels were known to be. And, as expected, German U-boats torpedoed the ship, exploding stored ammunition, killing 1,200 people. To further understand the deliberate nature of this setup, the German embassy actually put advertisements in the New York Times telling people that if they boarded the Lusitania, they did so at their own risk, as such a ship sailing from America to England through the war zone would be liable to destruction. In turn, and as anticipated, the sinking of the Lusitania caused a wave of anger among the American population, and America entered the war a short time after. The First World War caused 323,000 American deaths. J.D. Rockefeller made $200 million off of it. That's about $1.9 trillion by today's standards. Not to mention the war cost about $30 billion for America, most of which was borrowed from the Federal Reserve Bank at interest, furthering the profits of the international bankers. World War II. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked the American fleet at Pearl Harbor, triggering our entry into that war. President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared the attack was a day that will live in infamy. A day of infamy indeed, but not because of the alleged surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. After 60 years of surfacing information, it is clear that not only was the attack on Pearl Harbor known weeks in advance, it was outright wanted and provoked. Roosevelt, whose family had been New York bankers since the 18th century, whose uncle Frederick was on the original Federal Reserve Board, was very sympathetic to the interests of the international bankers, and the interest was to enter the war, as we've seen, nothing is more profitable for international bankers than war. In a journal entry by Roosevelt's Secretary of War Henry Stimson, dated November 25, 1941, he documented a conversation he had with Roosevelt. The question was, how should we maneuver them into firing the first shot? It was desirable to make sure the Japanese be the ones to do this, so that there should remain no doubt as to who were the aggressors. In the months leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt had done almost everything in his power to anger the Japanese, showing a posture of aggression. He halted all of Japan's imports of American petroleum. He froze all the Japanese assets in the United States. He made public loans to nationalist China and supplied military aid to the British, both enemies of Japan in the war, which, by the way, is completely in violation of international war rules. And on December 4th, 3 days before the attack, Australian intelligence told Roosevelt about a Japanese task force moving towards Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt ignored it. So, as hoped and allowed, on December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, killing 2,400 soldiers. Before Pearl Harbor, 83% of the American public wanted nothing to do with the war. After Pearl Harbor, 1 million men volunteered for the war. It is important to note, Nazi Germany's war effort was largely supported by two organizations, one of which was called IG Farben. IG Farben produced 84% of Germany's explosives, and even the Zyklon B used in the concentration camps to kill millions. One of the unspoken partners of IG Farben was J.D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company in America. In fact, the German Air Force could not operate without a special additive patented by Rockefeller's Standard Oil. The drastic bombing of London by Nazi Germany, for example, was made possible by a $20 million sale of fuel to IG Farben by the Rockefeller Standard Oil Company. This is just one small point on the topic of how American business funded both sides of World War II. One other treasonous organization worth mentioning is the Union Banking Corporation of New York City. Not only did it finance numerous aspects of Hitler's rise to power, along with actual materials during the war, it was also a Nazi money laundering bank, which was eventually exposed for having millions of dollars of Nazi money in its vaults. The Union Banking Corporation of New York was eventually seized for violations of the Trading with the Enemy Act. Guess who the director and vice president of the Union Bank was? Prescott Bush, our current president's grandfather, and of course our former president's father. Keep that in mind when considering the moral and political dispositions of the Bush family. Vietnam. The United States' official declaration of war on North Vietnam in 1964 came after an alleged incident involving two U.S. destroyers being attacked by North Vietnamese PT boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. This was known as the Gulf of Tonkin Incident. This single situation was the catalytic pretext for massive troop deployment and full-fledged warfare. One problem, however, the attack on the U.S. destroyers by Vietnamese PT boats never happened. It was a completely staged event to have an excuse to enter the war. Former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara stated years later that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a mistake, while many other insiders and officers have come forward, relaying that it was a contrived farce, a complete lie. Once in the war, it was business as usual. In October 1966, President Lyndon Johnson lifted trading restrictions on the Soviet bloc, knowing full well that the Soviets were providing upwards of 80% of North Vietnam's war supplies. Consequently, Rockefeller interests financed factories in the Soviet Union, which the Soviets used to manufacture military equipment and send it to North Vietnam. However, the funding of both sides of this conflict was only one side of the coin. In 1985, Vietnam's rules of engagement were declassified. This detailed what American troops were and were not allowed to do in the war. It included absurdities like North Vietnamese anti-aircraft missile systems could not be bombed until they were known to be fully operational. No enemy could be pursued once they crossed the border of Laos or Cambodia. And most revealing of all, the most critical strategic targets were not allowed to be attacked unless initiated by high military officials. Apart from these imposed ludicrous limitations, North Vietnam was informed of these restrictions and therefore could base entire strategies around the limitations of the American forces. This is why the war went on so long. And the bottom line is this: the Vietnam War was never meant to be won, just sustained. This war for profit resulted in 58,000 American deaths and 3 million dead Vietnamese.
From the time an American child reaches the 6th grade, they are taught that the key to success in life is to do well in high school so that they can get accepted to the best possible college. The better grades they get in high school, the better college they will have an opportunity to get into. They are taught that if they get into a great college and get their college degree, any type of job they desire in the field of their choice will be there waiting for them. After getting their dream job, they will be able to buy any car and house they desire, start their own family, and live the American dream. Most Americans today have an expectation of future economic success simply by obtaining a college degree. The entire purpose of elementary school is to prepare students for high school, and the entire purpose of high school is to prepare students for college. In fact, the U.S. now has hundreds of private college preparatory high schools that, at a cost of $25,000 per year, are supposed to increase students' chances of getting into a top-tier college. Students are taught to believe that if they don't go to college, they will be on a path to nowhere and will have no chance of ever building a successful career. Government regulations like No Child Left Behind have left grade and high schools in shambles. Instead of teachers having the freedom to think outside the box and use creative techniques to prepare their students for the real world, they are forced to be narrow-minded and teach with worthless information that will never help their students have successful careers. Today, there are no high schools left in America that teach students the knowledge necessary to start their own business, invent their own product, or even how to use the internet and other free resources to become educated about things without attending college. The annual cost to attend the average private four-year college in America today is $27,293, up 29% from 5 years ago, during the 2005-2006 school year when the annual tuition cost $21,235. This does not include the cost of textbooks, which have tripled over the past decade. Colleges are now charging $200 for each single textbook that has no resale value because they put out new, slightly revised versions with a new name each year. The textbook publishers are even colluding with college bookstores to make custom textbooks so that students can't save money by buying them online.
That's the big answer to everything. Education. They said we need more money for education. We need more books, more teachers, more classrooms, more schools. We need more testing for the kids. You say to them, well, you know, we've tried all of that, and the kids still can't pass the test. They say, don't you worry about that. We're going to lower the passing grades. And that's what they do in a lot of these schools now. They lower the passing grades so more kids can pass. More kids pass, the school looks good, everybody's happy, the IQ of the country slips another 2 or 3 points, and pretty soon all you'll need to get into college is a fucking pencil.
Colleges for the middle class and lower middle class are extremely dumbed down. Community colleges especially are extremely dumbed down. I got my GED when I was 20. I dropped out of high school my senior year for various personal reasons. When I went to get the GED, the tests are so simplistic, I was flabbergasted. They say the GED, the material is supposed to be at a 9th grade level. No. Okay, the science and social studies especially is shit you learn in the 5th, 6th grade. And when you go into a community college, say you're going in as a freshman and you're taking English 101 or whatever, there is this concept called talk to text. When I heard about this, I was completely baffled by it. Here's the deal. Talk to text basically shows you how to cut corners, how to take shortcuts. Say you're in an English class and you're reading 1984 by George Orwell or a short story by Malcolm X. They basically say, oh no, you don't have to read this entire novel. You don't have to read the entire short story. Oh no. That's a waste of time. What you do is you take a highlighter and highlight key points and write down questions and observations and, experiences you might have had. Key points that will make you do well on your essay. And doing well on an essay does not take a lot of imagination. When I first went into a community college, I did an experiment. I took an English class and a philosophy class. In the English class, I read a short story by Malcolm X, and what I did was I did the talk to text thing, which is basically I wrote, yeah, I read it, I comprehend it, no analysis, no forming my own opinion, not much of a conclusion. I comprehend this. I basically paraphrased the Malcolm X essay, and I got an A on it. It said, great job. Then in the philosophy class, we were studying a Greek philosopher. The concepts were happiness, friendship. For every human being, their ultimate goal is to achieve happiness, which I agree with, by the way. The only thing I don't like about this philosopher is he seemed to lump every concept into 3 or 4 categories. 3 types of friendship and so on. But anyway, I studied hard. I wrote my essay. I was persuasive. I analyzed it, formed my own conclusions. I got an A+++ on it, great comments all over it. The professor took me aside and was like, this is amazing. The problem is, even if I did what I did in the English class, the I comprehend this, I still would have probably gotten an A. That is the problem. So if you attend a community college, I'm not saying stop, even though college is a scam on so many fucking levels. The books, which I won't even talk about at this moment, don't stop. But when you go to write an essay, don't just write this, don't buy into the talk to text bullshit. Study hard, come up with a conclusion, an analysis, be persuasive, form your own opinion. And if you do that, if you don't just write, I comprehend this, the field that you are going into, people will look at that and be like, okay, this person's intelligent, If you write your essay well and don't just say, yeah, I comprehend it, people will look at that, and the field that you are going into, you will probably become more successful. See, what they're doing in these community colleges is they are training you to be a worker. Most of these jobs are shit pay, doing the same shit over and over again for the rest of your life. You're lucky if you get a promotion. They want workers. You pick a career, you get the information for that career, and then you go into it. It's regurgitation. See, the elite, that's what they want. They want workers, obedient workers. They don't want citizens capable of critical thinking, highly educated. To get a good education, you have to come from a family of power or from a family of money, which most Americans do not have that opportunity. To get a good education, you have to do well and then either get into an Ivy League school, Harvard, Yale, Brown, Dartmouth, and so many people in this country do not have that opportunity. Their opportunity is a community college where you're trained to be a worker, and then you go on and you work obediently. The people in power, the elite, they went to these top universities, Ivy Leagues, Yale, Harvard, because they had that opportunity. So study hard, do good work, and the field that you are going into, people will look at that, and you will probably have a more successful career.
We're We're just right outside the security perimeter at this national security event in New York City, just a few hundred yards away from Madison Square Garden, where at least 10,000 police are stationed, supposedly providing security for the Republican National Convention and all the delegates and media that are going to be here.
Sadly, we live in a world where, for the foreseeable future, you're going to have to provide security all the time.
Who do you work for? Well, you need to tell us. I mean, this is a free country. Officer, can you tell me this guy's badge number? Secret police just covers his badge up. Secret police in America.
This is what's called ambush journalism, and I disrespect you for that as well. So thank you and goodbye.
In the ritual?
That's none of your damn business.
We're also going to be talking to the protesters and finding out if the protesters are discussing real issues or if it's more of this phony left-right paradigm.
On Monday, that Zogby poll was released that showed 50% of New York City residents believe the government had foreknowledge and made a conscious decision not to intervene. 50% of the people who live in New York believe that.
And now industry and the federal government are just calmly saying that soon all new cars will have a camera in them that scan your face as you drive and instantly report back to the police department if you're driving while you're tired or if you're arguing with your wife. Under a new sales tax system being prepared that will be implemented to the national ID card, you'll have to thumb scan when you buy and sell. And the face scanning cameras we mentioned will keep track of you not just in your car, but as you walk down the street. Almost every federal, state, and local road in the country will be satellite and transponder tracked. We already mentioned that earlier. And when Californians heard about Governor Schwarzenegger's program, they got very upset. And over 90% of them were against it in polls. The governor just said, I don't care what you want, we're going to do this. It's going to take the average tax by the mile from 25 cents at the state level to over $3. Read it for yourself. It's the official news reports. Similar plans are being pushed by the feds in all 50 states. But that's just the financial hardship. There'll no longer be any open road. Everything you do will be tracked, chronicled, and traced. Whether it's a large highway or a rural road, everywhere you go will be chronicled.
I gotta talk to her because she took a picture. You have ideas? I can't get arrested! I can't! Let's not shed a tear over this now. Why are we playing games?
John, you're a witness to what just happened. What did we do?
We took a picture of a homeless person, felt sorry for her, and gave her some money. And then we were promptly almost arrested by Port Authority police in a subway.
The police have been arresting reporters across the city, and a judge had ordered them to stop, but that just seemed to encourage them.
Take him out. How about we go to whoever gave those to you and get them revoked? I just asked you to do me a favor and not tape over
It's
here.
my fault, sir. I'm his boss.
No. Listen, first of all, I'm talking. I don't need you to interrupt me while I'm talking.
Yes,
all right?
Okay. We're on our way to a protest that's unauthorized, not permitted. They've been arresting people by the thousands, and we're going to cover it. Of all the hundreds of huge protests we've seen, a small group broke off with a unpermitted march and is moving down towards Madison Square Garden, or MSG as New Yorkers call it. Now notice as we walk here that the roads have all been pinned conveniently ahead of the march. So tourists, anybody that's in here to be arrested, and we are now inside the pins. And look at them hurting us. Look at their cars hurting us. I wonder if it'll be like Monday night. I wonder if they'll run horses and mopeds into us.
11:35. If you're here at 11:35, they will arrest you.
I'm sorry.
They're hardly letting people out. They're opening up the pens a little inch to let people slowly trickle out. So they're set. And now we're getting in trouble for letting y'all know.
Well, that little story about how they're going to arrest people really worked. Look, everybody's leaving. Police then went in with barricades and broke the protest up into 4 different blocks and randomly arrested innocent people. It was the same story over and over and over again. And police brutality was completely out of control. Reporters for Reuters, the Associated Press, student reporters, tourists, even an American Spectator reporter was arrested and taken to Pier 57.
To force their unpopular agenda upon the planet.
Police arresting protesters. We are supposed to have First Amendment rights. Freedom to protest. They are harassing people, and they are getting away with it. Now, I lived in New York City for 2 years with my girlfriend, and New York City is the mother of the police state. You are literally on camera all the time from 5 or 6 different angles at least. And I was also harassed for being a juggalo by the NYPD. My story is on the Hatchet Herald. And if you have been harassed for being a juggalo, tell us about it at juggalosfightback.com. I was walking down the street wearing an ICP t-shirt. NYPD cruiser stops me, says, "Get up against the wall." Starts searching me. I said, "You can't do this." And they said, "One more word out of you and you will be arrested, gangbanger." They went through my bag, and then an unmarked vehicle came up. And a man dressed in civilian clothing took out a digital camera and took pictures of my t-shirt, made me turn around, took pictures of the back. He went through my bag, took pictures of another, I think the Mighty Death Pop t-shirt that I had, and a cheap Hatchet Man chain. And they said, "If we see you in this area again tonight, you will be arrested. We do not want to see you." That is completely sickening. Unconstitutional. And another thing, when I was living in Manhattan, we heard this argument, me and my girlfriend heard this argument outside between a couple. They were screaming at each other. Someone called the police. And I looked out the window once the police arrived, and I heard over the radio, Caucasian male, age 20 to 25, looking out the window. And they said what building it was, and they came over and they asked questions about what happened. They knew so quickly. It's just sickening. We live in a police state.
About 10 have come in. They've been coming in slowly in typically big black cars with what appears to be bulletproof glass, and we've got a few pictures of some of the people. We're being kept well back from the building by an awful lot of security people, but you know, there'll be more security as this thing develops.
Again, just a reminder to stay off the property, okay?
I am. This is the line. We checked with the city.
Yeah. Okay.
First Boston.
The ex-president of Ireland? Maybe? Okay. Danny will know.
I came here from upstate New York. I booked a room way in advance. When I checked in at 10 o'clock at night, they told me I had to be out at 8:30 in the morning. And so, of course, I complied to what they wanted. I wasn't happy about it because I had been tired. I drove quite a long way. Then I went down to have something to eat. And I just saw a bunch of security here, and I was wondering what was going on, and I asked questions, and they said they were having a wedding or they were having some sort of reception. So I decided to ask a couple more questions because I thought it was kind of weird. And then I saw them from my hotel window. They were in the back with flashlights looking at the trees, looking up through the trees, and they were also in front of the hotel combing. It looked like combing the hotel. So I kind of was wondering what was going on, and I left. I got up this morning, I checked out, and then the fellow that I spoke with, the last fellow I spoke with, said, "Well, you'll know all about it in the newspaper." Well, I didn't have to wait because there was a group of people out here telling me everything that was going on.
They're not fooling anybody any longer when you've got this many cops, you know, and detaining Alex Jones at the border.
Get them on both sides.
Yeah, you crook. Yeah, you're gonna go to jail like Ken Lay. Oh yeah, there's one right there. Hi. Hey, we're not your property. We're not your slaves. We're gonna defeat the New World Order. The New World Order is gonna be defeated. You realize that? I'm glad you do. Always does throughout history.
The boss. Boss is leaving.
Etienne Davignon is the honorary chairman of the Bilderberg Group, as well as the head of its steering committee. The committee he heads selects and invites each year's attendees. In the last decade, the list of attendees has been leaked to reporters by moles on the inside. Veteran newspaper reporter Jim Tucker has been covering the Bilderberg meetings for over 30 years and has physically attended more than 20. We traveled back to our hotel to see if Jim Tucker received the 2006 list.
First heard about Bilderberg in 1975, and I said, I don't believe it. That's not possible. Who in hell's Bilderberg? I spent 20 happy years with metropolitan newspapers. All the wires are clicking at my ear. That could not happen without me knowing about it. And the thing that first impressed me most was columns in 1957 by the late, great Westbrook Pegler, widely syndicated columnist. He wrote 2 lengthy columns about how approximately 100 leaders of international finance, heads of state, high public officials were meeting behind armed guards and closed doors on Jekyll Island, sealed off. What are these powerful internationalists doing? And why is it so secret? Why do they have armed guards outside? Why is it sealed off? The newspapers totally ignore it. Not a word. Total blackout in the United States. Since then, I've never stopped pursuing Bilderberg, or the whole international gangster organization led by Rockefellers and Rothschilds as they manipulate the world for their own selfish interest.
Jim, you've been waiting on the list. You normally get it on the first day. You haven't gotten it. We're told it might come in today. How important is that list?
It's absolutely essential, although identifying people outside, as we always do, is important too, to find out who is not on their own list. In recent years, someone from Europe has sent a machine copy with a letterhead and so forth without identifying himself. So far, I haven't heard from him. Well, Bilderberg assumed that name in 1954 at their first meeting as Bilderberg at the Bilderberg Hotel. It's a little bit like Shakespeare's As You Like It. They say to Shakespeare, what do you want to call this book? And he says, As You Like It, meaning whatever you want to call it. And they thought it was dictation, so one of his plays is called As You Like It, and the title has nothing to do with the play. So that's how the Bilderberg came by their name. Now, they had been meeting for half a century. The moneyed class had been meeting, but they decided they have to meet systematically every year, well planned in advance, in addition to maybe other smaller meetings throughout the year.
Sure this is the right turn, Jim?
No. Let's see if you can start.
This is the global government. They are setting the world agenda. Inside right now, they're deciding on whether or not there will be a war with Iran. They're deciding whether or not taxes will increase, whether oil prices will be suppressed or increased. There's much more on the agenda that we'll be finding out in the fullness of time. But those are 3 items that are heavy on their list this year.
This is Jim Tucker, ladies and gentlemen. 27 years covering these crooks.
Tucker, pleasure to meet
The
you.
media said he was crazy, it didn't exist. Now we forced him.
120 of the world's most powerful men, heads of state from Europe, high officials of the United States government, Treasury, White House, state, defense. They're setting the world agenda now. The reason they want secrecy is because they're doing evil. Evil is done under the cover of darkness. Good works are done in the sunshine.
Hi, how you doing? Good.
Get off the property, please.
Well, Jim has some questions for you.
I need you to move off the property, please.
Okay.
This is private property.
Sure.
It's a public sidewalk.
Oh, yeah, we are cooperating.
Thank you. Right onto the sidewalk.
Yeah, there's no implication that we aren't
Right
cooperating.
onto the sidewalk and stay there, please.
Sure, yeah, thank you.
Great.
Jim has some questions for you.
Again, I need you to stay right on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We actually checked with the city. The property line's actually right here.
Also,
That's good. Property line's actually right here.
We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. David Rockefeller.
It's David Rockefeller and the Corn Black at the beyond the hotel, and they had no bodyguards. One of my friends shouted, "Hey, Rockefeller!" and he turned back and he was afraid.
My name's Renee. I'm from Manitoba. Drove about 26 hours to get here, just to show that I'm against the Bilderbergers, just to fight for my freedoms, fight for my rights, make sure that my children can grow up in a free country.
My name is Daniel Estrelin, and I've been doing this for the last 15 years. I'm from Canada. I'm very proud of my country because, as you can see, there are a lot of people covering the Bilderberg conference. Last year, it took me 14 and a half hours to get to Munich. I was pulled off the plane in Milan. I was pulled off the plane in Munich. They interrogated me 4 hours in both places. I was able to call a friend, a journalist in Rome, as a result of his presence and others. Calling the foreign ministry department in Italy, they backed off and they let me go. They basically told me that they'll keeping an eye on me 24 hours of the day. The little hotel where we were staying at, Jim and I, out of the 20 rooms, 6 were occupied, 3 by the CIA and 3 by the German Secret Service. That's how serious these people are, and that's how afraid they are of actually what we may be able to reveal and what we actually do reveal publicly about the Bilderberger intents.
Daniel Estrelin has covered the Bilderberg meetings in Europe and North America for more than 15 years. His book, Club Bilderberg, has been translated into more than 20 languages and is a global bestseller. Estrelin has photographed many past Bilderberg meetings. Rockefeller frontman Henry Kissinger is always a key participant. Here you see the president of the CFR, Richard N. Haas, followed by Vice Chairman of Rothschild Europe, Franco Barnaby, who is speaking with Henry Kravitz, and behind them is Richard Holbrooke, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. The head of Daimler Chrysler, Jürgen Erich Schrimp, arrives by helicopter. Here, the owner of the Washington Post, Donald Graham, escorts Indra Nooyi, the head of PepsiCo. Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, whose father, Prince Bernhard, founded Bilderberg, is a leading figure in the group. Of course, globalist kingpin David Rockefeller, seen here with his bodyguard, James Ford, always attends. The then newly appointed World Bank chief Paul Wolfowitz is photographed at Bilderberg 2005. It has been reported that Wolfowitz had attended previous meetings while still the Deputy Secretary of Defense, a violation of the Logan Act. Under the Logan Act, it is a felony offense for any member of the federal or state government to meet with members of a foreign government without the express authority and authorization of the President or Congress. Put simply, it is illegal for members of the government to meet secretly behind closed doors with foreign power brokers due to the problems of corruption and espionage that it breeds. For this reason, many prominent politicians attend, but their names do not appear on the official list. Despite the Logan Act, the governor of New York's name, George Pataki, does appear on the list. and we were able to catch the governor on tape, walking with David Rockefeller at Brook Street. Multiple staff members inside Brook Street reported to us that Hillary Clinton attended for half a day. Several armored limos with diplomatic plates did arrive with police escorts and offloaded their passengers in the underground parking garage out of the sight of the press. Former World Bank President James Wolfensohn sardonically stared at our cameras.
They're upset about the fact that they're being exposed.
Well, I'm sure they are. I mean, look at the tinted windows. They don't want to be seen. They don't want even anybody to know they're here. So I'm sure they're ticked, you know, and that's why we're here to try to expose them.
Do you think that they were angry that they were on the front page of the local paper today? You think they're in there reading it right now, Jim?
Yes, I don't think they're happy about it. They prefer nothing at all, no publicity. They prefer absolute secrecy.
Yeah, you better look away. We're not your slaves. You don't own me.
Did you get a list of the attendees and everything, or not?
No, I've asked for one under a slight variation of my name, and I don't know if I'll get it or not. Also, it could happen today. For the last 3 years, I get back to the hotel.
And there's a copy there waiting for you.
Somebody who does not identify himself. I mean, I'm not just not revealing the source. I don't know the source myself. But a fact, because they want the Bilderberg letterhead on it, and makes a nice memento.
Perfect. Alex.
Yeah.
That's Chalabi, eh?
You think Chalabi?
No, I don't think. I know.
It looked like Chalabi, and it was a fat guy. Yeah. That was Ahmed Chalabi?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Then they're really going to attack Iran.
This guy is too president. It's Scandinavian Adrian Woolwich, Maria Monti. Over the last couple of years, they've been reeling with the amount of leakage that they've been experiencing, so it's getting harder and harder. But again, it will never get too hard for us because of the sources that we have inside are top-notch sources. People who are actually working for them, the Secret Service, the second layer, people in the Bilderbergers, the clerks, the administrative office, they're there. They are our eyes and ears, and every time there's something out, we always get the information. That's Francisco Pinto Balsamao.
I think that's the Queen.
It's the Queen. Yeah. Oh my God, you can't kiss her ear.
You see her?
Yes. Oh my God.
The Queen of Holland. What usually happens, the Secret Service guys who are protecting the Bilderberg delegates, the staff, the cooks, the chefs, when they actually get to see and to hear what some of these nasty people are talking about, they're the first ones to look for us and the first ones to make sure that we get the information from the meeting. We're very rigorous with information that does come out. We double, triple, and quadruple confirm the sources, make sure that all the information checks out. A lot of the stuff, the Bilderbergers have planted information, make sure that this disinformation nullifies the accuracy of the reporting, which is why we never publish the first thing we hear.
I don't think anybody could have predicted that they would try to use an airplane as a missile, a hijacked airplane as a missile.
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings. No specific threat involving really a domestic operation or involving what happened, obviously, the city's airliner and so forth.
There were no warning signs that I'm aware of.
USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center.
In confidential documents from the Philippines obtained by CNN, the plan was clear. He will board any American commercial aircraft, control its cockpit, and dive it at the CIA headquarters. Other buildings targeted the Pentagon and the World Trade Center.
Security and counterterrorism was blinking red, in the words of George Tenet, that the warnings of an imminent attack were so severe that something dramatic should have been done. It was unparalleled. Instead, our president went on a month-long vacation.
The head of Pakistani intelligence at the ISI, Mahmoud Ahmed, requested Omar Sheikh to wire $100,000 to Mohammed Atta, who was the lead hijacker.
Hijacker Mohammed Atta received wire transfers via Pakistan. The man sending the money to Atta is believed to be Ahmed Umar Saeed Sheikh.
Omar Sheikh admitted he was supported by the Pakistan government's intelligence service, the ISI.
Although we are told that 4 or 5 of the alleged hijackers were on each of the flights. If so, their names should have been on the flight manifests. But the flight manifests that have been released contain neither the names of the alleged hijackers nor any Arab names whatsoever.
We know that the men who were supposedly the hijackers had their houses, cars, credit cards paid for by the U.S. government. They were, in truth, agents.
Evidence was also apparently planted. The passport of one of the hijackers on Flight 11 was allegedly found in the rubble.
Goes through the fireball, through the side of the plane, and comes down to the ground unscathed. But something happened. For 6 months, they reported they had this passport. Boy, we've got it. We've got the proof. And then the guy stood up and was alive.
Several of these 19 men are still alive.
Of course we're after Saddam Hussein, bin Laden. He's
January 2001, the Bush administration orders the FBI and intelligence agencies to back off investigations involving the bin Laden family, including 2 of Osama bin Laden's relatives, who were living, guess where, in Falls Church, Virginia, right next to CIA headquarters.
When he was already America's most wanted criminal, he reportedly spent 2 weeks in the American hospital in Dubai, was treated by an American doctor, and visited by the local CIA agent.
We have not seen one piece of evidence that links Osama bin Laden directly to the planning stages of September 11th.
This failure to provide proof was later said to be unnecessary because bin Laden, in a video allegedly found in Afghanistan, admitted responsibility for the attacks. This confession is now widely cited as proof. But the man in this video has darker skin, fuller cheeks, and a broader nose than the Osama bin Laden of all other videos. We again seem to have planted evidence.
In 1976, Osama's older brother Salim bin Laden hired a man in Texas by the name of Jim Bath to handle all the investments in the United States for the bin Laden family. Jim Bath also happens to be a personal, almost lifelong friend and former Air National Guard pilot with George W. Bush. The connections between the Bushes and the bin Ladens become much more clear when George Herbert Walker Bush made trips to Saudi Arabia in 1998 and 2000 to meet with the bin Laden family on behalf of a company called the Carlyle Group.
How could anyone fly a 60-ton, 125-foot wide, 44-foot tall plane through this obstacle course?
The aircraft, before striking the Pentagon, reportedly executed a 270-degree downward spiral, and yet Hani Hanjour was known as a terrible pilot who could not safely fly even a small plane.
No seats, no luggage, no bodies. Nothing but bricks and limestone.
The official explanation is that the intense heat from the jet fuel vaporized the entire plane. Flight 77 had 2 Rolls-Royce engines made of steel and titanium alloy and weigh 6 tons each. It is scientifically impossible, but 12 tons of steel and titanium was vaporized by jet fuel.
We're also told that the bodies were able to be identified either by their fingerprints or by the DNA. So what kind of fire can vaporize aluminum and tempered steel and yet leave human bodies intact?
From my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. And as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand.
Shortly after the strike, government agents picked up debris and carried it off. The entire lawn was covered with dirt and gravel, so that any remaining forensic evidence was literally covered up. The videos from security cameras, which would show what really hit the Pentagon, were immediately confiscated by agents of the FBI, and the Department of Justice has to this day refused to release them. If these videos would prove that the Pentagon was really hit by a 757, most of us would assume the government would release them.
It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see from where we were was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees. We could see some people walking around in the area, but from where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
Pancake theory, according to which the fires, while not melting the steel, heated it up sufficiently to cause the floors weakened by the airplane strikes to break loose from the steel columns, and this started a chain reaction.
So you would expect then from that theory, which is the official theory, to see a whole stack of floors piled up on top of each other and then a spindle of core columns standing too.
The core of each of the twin towers consisted of 47 massive steel columns. If the floors had broken loose from them, these columns would have still been sticking up into the air 1,000 feet.
The plane did not cut all those core columns.
We designed the buildings to take the impact of the Boeing 707 hitting the building at any location.
The building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners.
That the plane flew straight into the building.
Through him, right.
So you're saying that the building was actually designed to cope with a hole like that and still survive?
Yeah, it was.
If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top of the World Trade Center, 110 floors up there, it would have taken 8 to 10 seconds to hit the ground, encountering no resistance whatsoever.
The Twin Towers came down in nearly free fall speed. 200,000 tons of steel shatters and explodes outwards over 500 feet.
This means that floors shattered at an average rate of about 10 floors per second.
There is no scenario for a pancake effect of buildings falling that allows them to fall at the rate of free fall.
Now what can do that? What can move mass out of the way explosives. "47 huge steel columns going up the core. They're interconnected. How do you get them to fail simultaneously so the core disappears? It looks like those core columns were cut."
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle.
I started looking at the molten metal. All three buildings, both towers in the rubble, in the basement areas, and Building 7, there's these pools of molten metal.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry. Like lava.
The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later, when the rubble was being removed. He said that molten steel was also found underneath World Trade Center 7.
So I'm looking through the official reports. What do they say about the molten metal? They say nothing. But wait a minute. This is important evidence. So where'd that come from? Thermite is so hot that it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter. The products are molten iron and aluminum oxide, which goes off primarily as a dust. You know those enormous dust clouds? You can imagine when you assemble these chemicals on a large scale. Molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed, and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet.
Part of the problem is that most people simply don't know much about Building 7 due to the extraordinary secrecy surrounding this collapse.
And this was a 47-story skyscraper. This building fell at 5:25.
It was not hit by a plane. This building had fires on only 2 or 3 floors.
And it was brought down by what we know was a controlled demolition.
Demolitions, they look just like that. You know, a kink in the middle, and then that building just comes straight down, almost at free fall speed.
They first blow one of the central columns so the building falls in on itself. Building 7 had a classic crimp or wedge. Its central column was blown out first, so it didn't structurally damage buildings just a few feet away from it.
Our office was on the B1 level. As I was talking to a supervisor at 8:46, and all of a sudden we hear, boom! An explosion so hard that pushed us upwards. And it came from the basement between the B2 level and the B3 level. And when I went to verbalize, we hear, boom! The impact of the plane on the top.
As I'm walking by the main freight corridor building in the corridor, that's when I got blown. I mean, the impact of the explosion threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening. All of a sudden, a big impact happened again, and all the ceiling tile was falling down, the light fixtures were falling. You know, you got to go clear across the whole from 1 to 2 World Trade Center, and then all of a sudden, it happened all over again. Something else hit us to the floor. Right in the basement, you felt it. Walls were caving in, everything that was going on. I mean, I know of people that got killed in the basement. I know of people that got broken legs in the basement. People that got reconstructive surgery because the walls hit them in the face.
According to standard operating procedure, if an FAA flight controller notices anything that suggests a possible hijacking, the controller is to contact a superior. If the problem cannot be fixed within about a minute, the superior is to ask NORAD to North American Aerospace Command to send up or scramble jet fighters to find out what is going on. NORAD then issues a scramble order to the nearest Air Force base with fighters on alert. But although interceptions usually occur within 10 or so minutes, in this case, 80 or so minutes had elapsed before fighters were even airborne.
It's a mind-bending anomaly. Not a single U.S. Air Force interceptor turns a wheel until it's too late. There are no jets at all.
What if they were so confused and had been so deliberately confused that they couldn't respond?
The reason that they didn't know where to go was because a number of conflicting and overlapping war game exercises were taking place. It involved the insertion of false radar blips onto radar screens in the Northeast Air Defense Sector.
Center Team U, we have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York. We need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise? Is this real world or exercise? There was another exercise, Vigilant Warrior, which was, in fact, according to a NORAD source, a live-fly hijack drill being conducted at the same time. With only 8 available fighter aircraft, and they have to be dispatched in pairs, they were dealing with as many as 22 possible hijacks on the day of 9/11, and they couldn't separate the war game exercises from the actual hijacks.
Page 172. The U.S. government has not been able to determine the origin of the money used for the 9/11 attacks. Ultimately, the question is of little practical significance.
The American authorities have not managed to trace the source of the funding. And then the most amazingly disingenuous statement, ultimately, is it of little consequence. It is of massive consequence.
Doesn't it matter who paid for 9/11?
The collapse of Building 7 has been recognized as especially difficult to explain. The 9/11 Commission report implicitly admitted that it could not explain the collapse of this building by not even mentioning it.
President, why are you and the Vice President insisting on appearing together before the 9/11 Commission?
Because the 9/11 Commission wants to ask us questions. That's why we're meeting, and I look forward to meeting with them and answering their questions.
Why you're appearing together rather than separately, which was their request?
Because it's a good chance for both of us to answer questions that the 9/11 Commission is looking forward to asking us, and I'm looking forward to answering them. Let's see.
Do you think they should be able to stand up and speak their own words?
They should go under oath.
They should be, yeah.
In public.
Don't you think that the families deserve to have a transcript or to be able to see what you
Adam,
said?
you asked me that question yesterday. I got the same answer, yeah.
The final report was a unanimous report. That means that if there was a single commissioner who had any objection about anything, that fact would be dropped from the report.
We have found out that he not only served on the transition team of the Bush administration, that he was a person who wrote a draft memo for the setup of the Bush administration's National Security Council, that he was an individual who wrote the preemptive war strategy that was eventually used for the war in Iraq, that he is a close friend of Condoleezza Rice's. We want him to resign.
There is literally nothing in the 9/11 report that the Bush administration did not approve of.
We can understand, therefore, why the Commission, under Zelikow's leadership, would have ignored all the evidence that would point to the truth, that 9/11 was a false flag operation intended to authorize the doctrines and funds needed for a new level of imperial mobilization.
armed with knives, armed with chemical, biological, nuclear weapons. Fanatics, terrorists, September 11th. September 11th, killers, September 11th, terrorists. Terrorists of Al-Qaeda, terrorists, nuclear weapons, terrorists. 9/11, terror, terrorist, evil. September 11th, September 11th. The terrorists, war and danger. September 11th, terrorism, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorists, 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 the terror, terrorists, terrorist, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorist, terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism. September the 11th, terror, weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th, terrorists, the evil terrorists, no.
Terrorism. The words are hypnotically repeated. Terrorism, terrorist, terrorist threat, and of course, believed to be linked to Al-Qaeda. But it's the so-called war on terrorism that's in our faces practically 24/7 as the inescapable focus of our existence.
One day, our grandchildren will look back on this time and ask, how was the war on terror won?
The entire U.S. ruling class, ruling elite, comes to see terrorism as the preferred means, indeed the only means, to provide social cohesion, to provide an enemy image for the society to keep it together. According to neocon theory from Carl Schmitt, you have to have an enemy image in order to have a society. It's a very dangerous thing because now it means that the entire social order, the political parties, intellectual life, politics in general, all based on a monstrous myth. Monstrous myth.
Look, the CIA has done in this country, what they've done to us is unbelievable. Look at the terrorist acts that have occurred. The CIA behind most, if not all of them. We had the Marine barracks. We had our embassy in Kenya. We had Pan Am 103. We had the USS Cole. We had Oklahoma City. We had the World Trade Center in 1993.
That helped the terrorists blow up the World Trade Center the first time. They built the bomb. They got the driver's license.
The informant, the informant, a fellow named Salam, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer, he was given the assignment to put the bomb together. And he went to his supervisor, his FBI supervisor, and said, we're going to put a dummy bomb in here, right? And the FBI supervisor said, no, we're going to put a real bomb.
The FBI actually carried out the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. They actually hired Ahmad Salam and paid him $1 million and gave him real explosives, a detonator, and told him to build a bomb and to give it to the foolish people that he was controlling to allow them to attack the World Trade Center complex.
Unfortunately for them, there were only 6 people killed, not enough to pass the legislation. So what happened is 2 years later, April 19, 1995, down comes Oklahoma City Murrah building, 168 people killed. 1 year later, the anti-terrorism legislation that takes away many of our constitutional rights and civil liberties is passed.
Because at 9:30 this morning, we were actually running an exercise for over a company of 1,000 people in London, based on simultaneous bombs going off precisely at the railway stations that happened this morning. So I still have the hairs on the back of my neck standing upright.
To get this quite straight, you were running an exercise to see how you would cope with this, and it happened while you were running the exercise?
Precisely.
Supposed to believe is some kind of coincidence, there was also an anti-terrorist drill going on 7/7. And again, just like 9/11, they were talking about attacks on the same targets, the same kind of tube stations, and exactly the same time as the actual attack happened, providing some kind of cover for what must be operations orchestrated in some way by the state.
I am absolutely appalled at how much people in this country do not think. We are given to understand that, that an Arabic guy out there up in the mountains financed the most elaborate attack on this country.
Do you think some people in a cave, were able to have NORAD stand down? Do you think that people in a cave were able to have all of this happen?
And when I think about how many Americans were killed in New York City, and believing as I do that this thing was a setup job, this is a textbook operation that Nazis used, and they've used it over and over again.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
By default of this agreement, the American Constitution will eventually be obsolete. You would think that a situation like this would be on the cover of every major newspaper. That is until you realize that the people who are behind this movement are the same people behind the mainstream media, and you are not told what you're not supposed to know. The North American Union is the same concept as the European Union, the African Union, and the soon-to-be Asian Union, and the same people are behind all of them. And, when the time is right, the North American Union, the European Union, the African Union, and the Asian Union will be merged together, forming the final stages of a plan these men have been working on for over 60 years. A one-world government. One bank, one army, one center of power. And if we have learned anything from history, it is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is Aaron Russo, a filmmaker and former politician. To his left is Nicholas Rockefeller of the infamous Rockefeller banking and business dynasty. After maintaining a close friendship with Nicholas Rockefeller, Aaron eventually ended the relationship, appalled by what he had learned about the Rockefellers and their ambitions.
I got a call one day from an attorney woman I knew, and she said, "Would you like to meet one of the Rockefellers?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And we became friends, and he began to divulge a lot of things to me. So he said to me one night, he said that there's going to be an event there, and out of that event, you're going to see we're going to go into Afghanistan, so we can run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We're going to go into Iraq to take the oil and establish a base in the Middle East, and we're going to go into Venezuela and try and get rid of Chavez. And the first two they've accomplished. Chavez they didn't accomplish. And he said you're going to see guys going into caves looking for looking for people that they're never going to find. You know, he was laughing about the fact that you have this war on terror. There's no real enemy. He's talking about how by having this war on terror, you can never win it because so it's an eternal war. And so you can always keep taking people's liberties away. And I said, how are you going to convince people that this war is real? He says, but the media can convince everybody it's real. I mean, you know, it's just that you keep talking about things, you keep saying it over and over and over again, and eventually people believe it. You know, you created the Federal Reserve in 1913 through lies. You create 9/11, which is another lie. Through 9/11, then you're fighting a war on terror, and now all of a sudden you go into Iraq, which was another lie, and now they're going to do Iran. You know, and it's all one thing leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. Now, I would say, what are you doing this for? What's the point of this thing? You have all the money in the world you ever want. You have all the power. I said, you know, you're hurting people. It's not a good thing. And he would say, what do you care about the people for? Take care of yourself and you take care of your family. And then I said to him, what are the ultimate goals here? He said, the ultimate goal is to get everybody in this world chipped with the RFID chip and have all money be on those chips and everything on those chips. And if anybody wants to protest what we do or violate what we want, we just turn off their chip.
That's right, microchipped. In 2005, Congress, under the pretense of immigration control and the so-called war on terrorism, passed the Real ID Act, under which it is projected by May 2008, you will be required to carry around a federal identification card, which includes on it a scannable barcode with your personal information. However, this barcode is only an intermediary step before the card is equipped with a VeriChip RFID tracking module, which will use radio frequencies to track your every move on the planet. If this sounds foreign to you, please note that the RFID tracking chip is already in all new American passports. And the final step is the implanted chip, which many people have already been manipulated into accepting under different pretenses.
We have a Florida family who are really pioneers in a brave new world. They have volunteered to be the first ever to have microchip identification devices implanted into their body.
After 9/11, I was really concerned with the security of my family.
I wouldn't mind having something planted permanently in my arm that would identify me.
In the end, everybody will be locked into a monitored control grid where every single action you perform is documented. And if you get out of line, they can just turn off your chip, for at that point in time, every single aspect of society will revolve around interactions with the chips. This is the picture that is painted for the future if you open your eyes to see it. A centralized one-world economy where everyone's moves and everyone's transactions are tracked and monitored, all rights removed. The most incredible aspect of all. These totalitarian elements will not be forced upon the people. The people will demand them. For the social manipulation of society through the generation of fear and division has completely detached humans from their sense of power and reality. A process which has been going on for centuries, if not millennia. Religion, patriotism, race, wealth, class, and every other form of arbitrary, separatist identification and thus conceit has served to create a controlled population, utterly malleable in the hands of the few. Divide and conquer is the motto, and as long as people continue to see themselves as separate from everything else, they lend themselves to being completely enslaved. The men behind the curtain know this, and they also know that if people ever realize the truth of their relationship to nature, and the truth of their personal power, the entire manufactured zeitgeist they prey upon will collapse like a house of cards.
The whole system that we live in drills into us that we're powerless, that we're weak, that our society is evil, that it's crime-ridden, etc., and so forth. It's all a big, fat lie. We are powerful, beautiful, extraordinary. There is no reason why we cannot understand who we truly are, where we are going. There is no reason why the average individual cannot be fully empowered. We are incredibly powerful beings.
You know, I think I spent 30 years of my life, the first 30, trying to become something. I wanted to become good at things. I wanted to become good at tennis. I wanted to become good at school and grades and everything I kind of viewed in that perspective. I'm not okay the way I am, but if I got good at things, I realized that I had the game wrong. The game was to find out what I already was. Find out what I already was.
Now, in our culture, we've been trained for individual differences to stand out. So you look at each person, immediately it is brighter, dumber, older, younger, richer, poorer, and we make all these dimensional distinctions, put them in categories and treat them that way. And we get so that we only see others as separate from ourselves in the ways in which they're separate. And one of the dramatic characteristics of experience is being with another person and suddenly seeing the ways in which they are like you, not different from you, and experiencing the fact that which is essence in you and which is essence in me is indeed one. The understanding that there is no other. It is all one. And I wasn't born Richard Alpert. I was just born as a human being. And then I learned this whole business of who I am and whether I'm good or bad or achieving or not. All that's learned along the way.
The old appeals to racial, sexual, and religious chauvinism, to rabid nationalist fervor, are beginning not to work. A new consciousness is developing which sees the earth as a single organism and recognizes that an organism at war with itself is doomed.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national.
This life is tricky, mean and strange. You can only be sure about one thing: change. For worse or for better, maintain. Catch wisdom, try to gain brains. In my life, I seen a lot come and go, like a non-stop fashion show. Very little shit lasts forever, and just because shit's new, it ain't better. for life, and I prayed that I'll never change every night. I said never again, and then I did it, and did it again. I can't pretend, I won't lie. Yo, I've lost control, and it's a scary endeavor. I got it together, but it took forever. Now I want forever to be just like this, the shit I wish.
Happiness is in your own head. How you perceive shit, believe it is. It's all you. Some of us have fools, can't help it. Living in a bad mood. Shit hurts, then it only gets worse. They don't get it, not even the experts. But trust me, it won't last forever. You hit bottom, shit finally gets better. Some don't need bank to laugh and live on the bright side, whatever the path. When you hit 40 or 50, that's just half. Enjoy youth, cause as you don't get back, forever revolves around you. That's your time, I'm living in mine too. How much positivity are you blind to? You only live once, I'll remind you.
That good shit lasts forever, but you just might like the new changes better. It's funny how we adapt and keep it together as the months roll by, seasons and weather.
But when it all shuts off,
the death bomb.
And that'll be the day you forever will stop. Until then we experience these emotions with peaks sky high, lows deep as oceans.
I wanna see you and me last forever, loop this life up and end it never, and live through the ages, the lows, the stages, and never let them close the pages.
To find peace of mind is impossible. Forever is plagued with obstacles, so we make the best of good times. We still can't play, we can't rewind.
We just wanna see us all together
after forever, off in Shangri-La.
We just wanna see us all together
after forever, off in Shangri-La.
We just wanna see us all together
after forever, off in Shangri-La.
We just wanna see us all together